everyone. I gave a tour earlier to a lot of you, but is there anyone who has never been to the South Street Seaport Museum? Okay, great. Same people, some of you have forgotten because now you've not been here. So welcome. Our museum is like a very interesting museum. It's a multi-campus museum that celebrates New York as a great waterfront metropolis by interpreting that history in the past and the future, also encompassing issues that affect us with the water, such as climate change, which is really relevant to us all. As a public programming person, I really work to expand the story that we're telling, to fill in the gaps that are in our collection. And this vessel we're on is actually a really great tool to do that, because I've been inspired by many of the ports that Wavertree went to, so that we're able to celebrate cultures from all over the world in a museum where they might not normally feel seen or get their stories told. And if you were wondering, as guides, as I'm sure you are, what do I say about the South Street Seaport Museum if I'm passing by? A really great resource is available to you. The museum just joined Bloomberg Connects. So if you have not checked out our Bloomberg Connects site, please do. All of that information has been recently vetted, recently approved by the museum, has some really interesting sort of stories that you can tell, particularly about Skimmerhorn Road, if you're walking by there, or various things in the museum's campus. And if you have any questions, always reach out to me or at programs at cny.org, SEANY.org. Yes, question?
Thanks for speaking for us. The tour guide license that we have will get us into some things free and not other things free. I have done the museum for free sometimes in the past. Is that currently granted to tour guides?
So the museum is always pay what you wish. So in theory, yes. I believe the official talking points is that it is pay what you wish, and we are very open to having it be open to an option of paying zero to whatever you wish in a way that feels good for everyone. If that makes sense.
So GANYC is partnering with New York City Tourism and Conventions to help promote tourism to the U.S. in general and New York City specifically during National Travel and Tourism Week. GANYC will be mentioned in an article about walking tours across the 5 boroughs on NYCtourism.com and in NYCTC's consumer newsletter to be published the week of May 13th. GANYC's logo will be featured in a campaign that will appear on the link and NYC's digital billboards. GANYC will be tagged in NYCTC's social media initiatives featuring walking tours. And then there is a fun interactive social media splash initiative where we will all ask our members to post Instagram stories at the same time on the same day, all of which will be reposted on NYCT New York City Tourism and Conventions Instagram account. An email blast with more information on this will go out shortly. We'd love for everyone to participate, and it's a great way to get wider exposure for your tours. So that sounds like a lot of fun. Committee involvement. As was discussed at last month's meeting, we want to make it easier for GANYC members to get involved in our committees. We are working on a committee con event for later this year that will allow all members to learn more about what committees do, how they work, but in the meantime, we are going to ask all committees to post their meeting schedules to the GANYC event calendar. Committee chairs look for further guidance on this shortly. As we often say, the more you put into GANYC, the more you get out of it. So please consider joining a committee and help our association and our industry grow. We're getting there. Statue of Liberty update. Our favorite subject. We reached out to the National Park Service about the renovations at Ellis Island to request that they find a space to allow guided tours to return to the inside of the renovated museum to some degree. But so far, our efforts have been rebuffed. We will continue to pursue this issue with NPS and keep you posted. In addition, GANYC member Cherie Davis drafted a letter, I'm sure it was very sweet, to the NPS, to the National Park Service, about the intolerable new wait times with the temporary security tent now in place at Battery Park. We are fine-tuning the language and message and plan to send it to NPS officials soon. We will share the letter on our members' Facebook page once it has been sent. Thank you, Cherie, for taking the initiative on this issue. Unfortunately, nothing to report about the scammers in Battery Park. We continue to investigate the best resources within the city, state, federal governments to try to put a stop to their dangerous and predatory practices in Battery Park. So, hey, Cherie, stand up for a second just so we can say thank you. There you go. All right, on health news, not as pleasant. Nina Mendez shared news with us about one current and one former GANYC member currently dealing with some health issues. Sue Katz is recovering from neurological surgery at Koerner New York Hospital, and hopefully will be going to rehab eventually. The phone number for the nurses station number for Sue is 212-746-0344. I'll read it again. The nurses station is 212-746-0344. And you can come up to me after the meeting and I'll, read it to you. Check with the nurse if Sue wants to receive visitors. Former GANYC member Jane L. Marks was admitted to Koerner New York Hospital after taking a fall on Friday, April 19th. Call the nurses station to see if she is accepting visitors. That number is 212-746-0325, and again, I can provide that number after the meeting. Okay, and lastly, NYC 400 Ad Hoc Committee. You'll notice that the first committee report on the agenda is for a new ad hoc committee that we are forming to address all things related to the New York City 400th anniversary in 2025. We are really excited about the possibilities that this momentous anniversary can provide to GANYC, to the tour guiding industry in New York City, and the city at large. We will give more details during the committee report. However, some of what we are discussing might require a monetary investment on GANYC's part to develop the types of programs we are exploring. So we need to keep growing our membership, here we go, numbers to help fund such initiatives. You, our members, are the best evangelists. So reach out to your fellow guides who are not members, tell them that there are big things to come with GANYC and they don't want to miss out. All right, so that is Michael's presidential report. And next we have industry partner, Jeanette Koerner. I apologize because in the agenda it says Jennifer, but her name is Jeanette Koerner. Event and program coordinator for Alon Tourism, representing I Love New York Gifts. And I have a bio that I just got, so I'm going to read it to you because she's very impressive.
It's a lot of pressure.
All right, so my mother's name is Janet. Third name. Jeanette Koerner, representing I Love New York Gifts through Alon Tourism Solutions, brings a diverse background and dedication to fostering meaningful connections and driving success in the tourism industry. With a solid foundation in management and a talent for nurturing productive relationships, Jeanette is thrilled to provide GANYC members with information and opportunities you will have through I Love New York Gifts. Take it away, Jeanette.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine.
With your slides.
Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here tonight and to meet you all. I am Jeanette from Alon, and I'm thrilled to be here to talk to you about I Love New York Gifts. Specifically, I'll be discussing how I Love New York Gifts can benefit your groups and why they're such a great choice for their shopping. Who is I Love New York Gifts? They are the only gift store licensed to display the I Love New York logo, and which makes it easy to recognize them across the city. They sell all I Love New York logo gear, NYPD, FDNY, and Wall Street full merchandise, along with many iconic New York items. They've been in business for 30 years, and as you can see, their mission statement is to provide the best gifts and souvenirs in New York, providing customers with the best selection of merchandise, shopping experience, competitive prices to any other souvenir stores in New York City. They have 17 store locations throughout the city, 15 stores in Midtown, and 2 in downtown in Lower Manhattan. They're easily accessible wherever you are in the city. And their downtown store is right in the Westfield Mall, which is easy access from One World and the 9/11 Museum. They also have extended hours. They're open from 8 a.m. to midnight, so plenty of shopping time for anybody. As you can see, we have the QR code here, and what that does is if you scan it, it gets the list of all their 17 locations that you can have on your phone at all times.
Oh, apologies.
That's okay, I
Was
was
that-
doing that.
That's right, okay.
That was right. I Love New York Gifts manufactures at least 50% of their merchandise, so they're guaranteeing you to get the best quality merchandise at affordable prices. So as you can see here from the images, they have a large variety of great items, shot glasses, t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, you name it, they have it. So it's a large variety and your guests will be happy with all the merchandise. Okay, and for you guys, again, you guys, this is for you. So if you come into any of their 17 locations with your badge and your GANYC ID membership, you will get 10% along with your guests to any of the merchandise in the store, which is really great. So that would be a great incentive to come in and do shopping with all the great items that your guests will love. And that wraps it up. Before I'd like to introduce the general manager and the point of contact for I Love New York Gifts, which is Artin, who's in our audience right here. Artin, say hi. So if we have any questions after this, he'll be happy to answer them. Again, he's your point of contact, and his information is on the GANYC website. So at this time, does anyone have any questions? No? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Are they all, 50% of them are manufactured by you guys? Are they manufactured locally?
No, they're not.
Manufactured overseas.
I had a tourist ask me if there's any food gifts that you can give people from New York. So is there something that, a gift of some kind of food you could bring back from New York?
From this gift shop?
Yeah, cookies, whatever, special.
That's along New York.
Yeah, just the I Love New York, just the souvenirs that you saw.
What's your hottest item?
The hottest item.
Oh, where's that? Oh, thank you. What's the hottest item, Martin? Tell us. What's the hottest item? The best-selling item.
Yeah, it's obviously it's the white Alon New York t-shirt.
The t-shirts? Those are always a go-to, right, to bring back at home. And you?
Are you getting in 400-year merch anytime soon? Preparation for the 400th anniversary push?
That's a great question.
Well, we've been planning, but we don't have any active merchandise in the stores yet. We have to go through the options. We might have just some t-shirts or some simple ones. We're not gonna have a big collection of it, but. we might
But
have
you will
seasonal
have it.
t-shirts.
It's in the works right now.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Okay. That's it? Okay, well, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And so, yeah. Give us a second, we need to set up the next speaker's computer. So, yeah, I'm gonna, okay, so our next speaker is going to, no, don't worry, Jeanette's gonna introduce you, all right? Did you have something to read, right? Okay. So, Eileen Rourke will introduce our guest speaker, Barbara Mensch.
Should we turn the lights down?
We can. Like right now, we'll, yeah, okay.
With your permission, Zach, may I touch the board?
Yes, they do the right ones.
Okay.
So the lights are gonna come off. Also, we were waiting too. I forgot to mention, if you didn't go on the tour, you are in history right now. This is the last remaining fully rigged, three-masted, iron-hulled cargo ship in the world.
Really?
Really. And now the lights are going to come off in that. So there you go.
So we have to get this thing to start from the beginning.
Okay. Right, so,
Maybe we need the lights.
yeah, so can we do the lights?
The lights are coming
And
back
then
on.
Eileen Rourke is going to introduce Barbara Mensch, and I'm going to help her technically get this thing going. All right. Just keep going.
Good evening, and it is delightful that we are at the South Street Seaport Museum in Wavertree, because it is the perfect setting for our speaker, Barbara Mensch. You got sort of a short bio, but I'll tell you a little bit more about her. Tonight, we're going to be having a presentation and discussion based on her amazing photographs. We're focusing on A Falling Off Place, which is her newest book. And at the end, there are copies if you want to purchase a copy, and Barbara will sign it. A little bit about Barbara. Barbara, oh, sure, okay. Or I could use my tour guide voice.
Oh, yeah, give her the mic.
Okay.
Yeah, that would work.
It just needs to be really close to your mouth.
Yeah. Is it on? Yes.
Sure.
Oh, actually, no.
Or back. Back.
Back? I think it's up. Back.
I don't know which way.
Great. We're on a ship.
Does that work?
Or don't worry about the mic then.
It got bigger, right?
I don't know if this is on or not. It looks like it's on.
Okay.
No, oh, now it's on, okay. If not, I'll use my tour guide voice, as we say. But Barbara Mensch is a native New Yorker and a renowned photographer and author. Best known for her images of the New York waterfront below the Brooklyn Bridge, her work spans more than 4 decades of capturing unforgettable imagery of urban life. A Falling Off Place, the transformation of Lower Manhattan, reflects on the decades of change that have impacted the vital neighborhoods bordering the waterfront and the tip of the island. In the New Yorker magazine published last fall, writer Nicole Ruda comments, a falling off can indicate decline or diminishment, often gradual, the petering out of a business. Sorry.
You want me to hold it?
Yeah, no, it's okay, it's okay.
Do you need a mic stand?
No, it's okay, it's not gonna take that long. All right, let me just start this quote again, because I think it really captures the book and your photographs. So Nicole Rudick, a New York magazine writer, published last fall. New Yorker magazine, sorry. A falling off can indicate decline or diminishment, often gradual, the petering out of a business, for instance, or the decay of a once marvelous building. Or it can refer to something abrupt and absolute. Both senses haunt Barbara Mensch's photographic history of Lower Manhattan, in particular the Fulton Fish Market, which for a time was an island unto itself. Barbara has also published books on related themes to include South Street and the Last Waterfront, The People of South Street, as well as the Brooklyn Bridge. This book you may be more familiar with, In the Shadow of Genius, The Brooklyn Bridge and Its Creators. Ms. Mensch's photography has been exhibited in numerous galleries and museums worldwide. Here in New York, her work is in important collections, including the Brooklyn Museum, MoMA, and the Museum of the City of New York. Currently, right here in the Tin Building, yes, we're not forgetting the Seaport. So right here in the Tin Building, if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, is a permanent site-specific installation called The Nobility of Work, which is a tribute to the workers of the Fulton Fish Market. So it is with great pleasure I present Barbara Mensch. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen, for asking me to do this talk tonight. And I want to say, can everyone hear me in the back? That this is the first time I've ever talked to a group of tour guides. The only experiences I've had with tour guides is really walking back and forth over the Brooklyn Bridge and eavesdropping for years on their commentaries. I also recently had my own experience when I was asked to give a tour in the pouring rain of some of the areas that were critical to the Fulton Market's operation. From that experience, I learned a lot about the people who come to these tours. So in this talk, I just want to preface it by saying that I'm a visual artist, and the work that I do, the stories that I tell, are mostly told through my own personal experiences with the world, with life, with the people that I meet. And perhaps in this talk, since we have such a short period of time, I will try to talk as much as I can about one of the most important projects that I would have done in my lifetime, and that was my early work on South Street. The men at the Fulton Market were in many ways soothsayers. They predicted the future in a way that I was surprised about, particularly looking back all these years on the work that I did there, including the oral histories. And also, they taught me lifelong lessons of survival. And that survival, of course, includes the fact that making a living and earning a living and falling back on your strengths was a crucial part of my education. And of course, part of the experiences I had down there were also not to be blind to the realities of that world, which tended to be rather grim, stark, and often sadistic, racist, and all the other things that go along with dealing with a certain group of people who've lived outside of the culture and society. That being said, I want to start this talk with the most obvious place. This is the first shot in my book, and I found this map in the Library of Congress, and I fell in love with it for a certain reason. And one of the things I do in my talks sometimes is I like to throw things out to the audience to make them become a part of the experience of learning and growing and finding certain kinds of information in a conversation that they normally would not get if someone just stands and lectures. So the first map here is from the 1800s, and why it astounded me was if you can, and I love the little ship up there, if you can see here, all along the tip of Manhattan were piers, and when you think about it, when you think about change and transformation, the fact that Lower Manhattan was the mainstay of trade and shipping since the Europeans first came here. So I want to ask any of the tour guides who've done tours of Lower Manhattan, what is the most critical thing to know about South Street, Hudson Bay, and if you look around at the way the map, the way the island at the tip wraps around, I would like to hear someone from the audience just throw out something at me. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, stand up, quick. Thank you.
And tell us your name, please.
I'm Stan O'Connor.
Okay.
I worked for several years at 110 South Street. They dug the foundation, they dug the concrete floor out of Runaway to make the Farrow's Pizza several years ago. It is absolutely, it really brings people in when you show them the artifacts that are dug up from below the surface. This is all landfill going back all the way.
What artifacts? And then I'm gonna move on.
Some coal, pieces of chinaware, iron nails.
Okay. Okay. Yes, and of course, this is a treasure trove for archaeologists. But the reason Lower Manhattan became an entity, okay, and a moneymaker was oysters. And the landfill, and I still, I mean, I live here, and for years I still can't wrap my head around the idea that the island expanded out because of oyster shells, which were called middens. And as recently as a few decades ago, when the FTA was excavating, they found these mounds of oyster shells, which became the landfill, which became the waterfront as we know it today. It's mind-boggling. So, for all you people out there that do tours, I can only stress that talking about oysters as the foundation of New York, you get a lot of laughs, and it might be really interesting for the people that you're serving in your conversations. So you can go to we can move. Okay, so this is one of the first photographs I have in my book. I found it was like in the garbage in my darkroom. God knows what one finds when you're an analog photographer. And I couldn't believe, sometimes, especially when you're younger, you don't have that understanding of what's important because the history has not yet become history. So what I love about this photograph, I must have been up on the New Market building. God knows, I climbed up there. And it's just this beautiful slice of old New York by the waterfront, because you could see here all the ancient maritime warehouses, by the way, that were built on the Dutch foundations, and later the English settlers rebuilt them. And of course we had, I'll talk about this a little later, the characteristic of Lower Manhattan is all the fires that destroyed many of the neighborhoods. So you could see the FDR, you could see a little bit of the underbelly of the fish market here, and the striation, South Bridge. So I said to myself, this was a keeper, and it's one of the early photographs from the first decade chapter of my book, my new book. Okay, next. And I'm not the kind of artist that likes to, talk about myself in a positive light. I tend to be very, I can always do better, But these early images of the Paris bar were really the catalyst for me to even explore the waterfront neighborhood, because you weren't allowed to go into the bar and take pictures, because over the decades, the Fulton Market and South Street was always under investigation, and it usually came in waves. And a lot of the wise guys used to hang out in the cloakroom in the back, but it's not such interesting photographs. But Mikey, the bartender, the first night I got thrown out, he let me come back in the morning the following day because they were closing the bar and the building was being sold. So this man here, and that's Captain Clay, a lot of the old waterfront characters, I was very proud that and so thankful that I was able to meet some of the last wave of the real waterfront characters. And that, in my view, is what makes New York, New York, or why people are so enchanted with it, because we have all of the characters and the mythological figures from TV and the movies, but these guys were the real deal. Anyone that I met down there had these incredible stories to tell, and because of the closed nature of this man's world, this working man's world, and on top of that, the investigations in the early 80s that were conducted by the federal government, and of course Rudolph Giuliani, who was then the federal prosecutor for the Southern District of New York, it was very difficult to make these kinds of pictures. But in the end, I did. And as far as I know, I'm the only photographer that ever made photographs inside the Paris bar. So I'm thankful for that I stuck to it. Okay, next. Okay, this isn't my picture, but this is a little bit of my real neighborhood. And this was not taken, this was taken a little before my time. But Carmine's Bar, which is now an Italian restaurant, was one of the main hangouts for the wise guys. And they would never allow me to take photographs in there. And I obliged them. But this was the world of the waterfront. And anyone that glosses over that, will only do that out of necessity, to not share this aspect of New York life. And for me, being down on the waterfront, the characters, whether they were doing things that were considered illegal or not, or making an honest day's work, it was still their world, and they had their own codes of behavior and senses of morality, what was right, what was wrong. So I put this in because I was studying this picture. I mean, that guy I remember, but you can see already that this was, in all of my photographs that I made down there, the men always had these stances. I can't really explain it. I can only communicate it through the pictures that I took. So anyway, that was Carmine's Bar, and now it's an Italian restaurant. And if you're doing a tour, you could say, well, this is what it was then, this is what it is now. But I always feel that telling these stories, like what were these locations? Who lived here? Who worked there? I mean, I always feel that New York is so rich in that way, and it's unique. And I just came back from Paris. I was there for a few weeks, and Paris is an incredible city, but it still doesn't have that. It's like the New York edge to it, and that's something that you can't. It's ingrained in the people, and it's ingrained in the buildings, and it's something I observed. Anyway, we can continue. And these are some of my early photographs of the piers that actually existed here. And again, one of the things we can all reflect on is the loss of the ability of a man or a woman to work with their hands or to work with rudimentary tools. And these photographs that were made back in the early 80s show the ice house where the fish that was not sold during the market day, which of course was conducted at night, they would repack the fish in the ice in their coolers. So we could go on to the next slide. And of course, we had, I would always look for places in the market that were photogenic, certain places that had signs or a certain kind of lighting. So I made a series of portraits. It took years to create these portraits because, again, many of the people were not that comfortable with having a camera in their face. So, but you could see here, very similar to the guy standing in Koerner's bar, you know, that he had this kind of like tough guy stance and very reassuring of who he was. And there is his grappling hook. So we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so what I did here is put in a little bit of what you can consider oral histories, and I'm very in love with Studs Terkel. I've read a lot of his work. And these oral histories, and again, if you go back and you research all of the people who were able to share their stories about growing up in New York in these specific locations, then you find gold. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read a little. So what town in Italy were your parents from? Nunzi, puffing on his cigar. What? Are you kidding me? They were born here, right over here on Cherry Street, Barbara. What year was that? Nunzi. 1888. So they lived on Cherry Street, but what about you? Where were you born? I was born, taking another puff on his cigar. I was born on Monroe Street. That's right here, very close to the Brooklyn Bridge. Can you paint a picture of what it was like? I want you to talk about the neighborhood. Nunzi, still puffing on his cigar. It was a badass neighborhood. Nunzi looks around South Street, takes another puff on his cigar, and abruptly responds, everybody was poor, Barbara. Tell me a little more. We were so poor, I don't want to remember. We had 11 kids in 4 rooms. Barbara, can you describe the house? What was it like? Nunzi, are you for real? What? Are you kidding? A house? It was an apartment, 11 kids in 4 rooms and a bathroom in the hallways. Nunzi picks up the newspaper that is strewn about by the fish stand. We need to take this here. He holds up the newspaper. Bang a nail in the wall, in the bathroom, and that was here. Toilet paper cost 3 cents in those days. You couldn't buy a loaf of bread with that in those days. You can advance the slide. It was the slums, but now they give it a fancy name, ghetto. How did you spend your life out on the streets? Nah, up on the roofs, playing with my friends. We had more kids on one block than all of Queens. Barbara, what kind of events can you remember about your childhood in the neighborhood? I remember this kid, he wanted to go kite flying on the roof. One day he was flying his kite. Nunzi makes a gesture with his arms like he's flying a kite. He ran with the kite and fell off the roof. Fell onto the clothesline, stupid bastard. You mean he fell off the roof trying to fly his kite and was saved because he got tangled up in the clotheslines below the roof? Nunzi, yeah, stupid bastard. I suppose. I remember at 5 in the morning after dinner, we used to throw garbage out the window. Who's gonna walk down the stairs? Barbara, you used to throw your garbage out the window? Nunzi, not only me, the whole neighborhood. When did you first start working down here in the Fulton Market? When I was 14 years old. That was 45 years ago. Nunzi switches his thoughts, and now they're pushing us out like dogs. Points around South Street in the direction of the construction. You can advance it. And that's Nunzio. So you can see what I would do back then is use these backdrops to photograph, different men. And when I photographed him, he had just been released from prison.
Microphone.
When I photographed him, he had just been released from prison for tax evasion. So we can advance. If we can go. And this is another one of my early friends, Mikey the Watchman. And you could see that he wasn't working. His job was to sell high-interest loans on Peck Slip, and that's what he did. Okay, we can advance it. And here's a little bit of the work ethic. This is Maxie. He used to sell clams in the middle of the night on the street. And, you know, people don't realize the hard work that these guys had to do. And normally those hand trucks could handle up to 600-700 pounds of seafood that they would have to push in freezing cold, icy weather, or, you know, in 100-degree heat down South Street to the vans that would come to pick up the seafood and deliver it to their stores. Okay. And this is another one of my favorites. It's in Smitty's Filet House. And just remember that years ago, seafood was caught by hand, processed by hand, and in the Fulton Market, they didn't have machines to cut the fish. It was all done by hand. And of course, you know, light bulbs and cigarettes coming out in the middle of the night to that theater, which is what it was for me at any rate. It was performance. Okay, we can go on to the next. So the other aspect of this new book that I'm doing is it's divided into 3 sections: the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000 and beyond. So this photograph was taken around Hurricane Sandy, but I've had my own personal relationship with the East River and the Brooklyn Bridge. And this photograph, I can sometimes be quite frightened of the river because it's very turbulent, and even in the summer or on very hot days, if you're out there, particularly if you have a tour and you're managing the tour out on the river, you could still feel the turbulence. So it has that kind of feeling of for me, of intimidation. And of course, the floods happened in the middle of the night. And one of the things about Lower Manhattan that people hopefully are aware of is all the floods and fires that we've had, particularly in the 90s. So even before Hurricane Sandy, we had a tremendous deluge in 1993, in 1997, before the bigger one that occurred with Hurricane Sandy. So for this particular photograph, I had to wrap myself up in bubble wrap and wade into, again, you can understand that this whole waterfront area being built on landfill has a certain characteristic. It's like the waterfront all the way down to the Battery is like a soup bowl. So anytime we have torrential rains that continue on, become flooded. So this is a phenomenon that goes back in history. So we can go on to the next one. And floods and fires have been a characteristic of Lower Manhattan since the Dutch settled, which is why we do have some, of course, we have some remaining beautiful structures, but a lot of them were destroyed in many fires over the centuries. So this one was, in my time, in the 90s, one of the fires down at the market, which of course became front page news everywhere. And I was home getting ready to work that morning and ran up on the bridge to make this photograph, not realizing that it was an ominous, it seemed to be years later an ominous portent of what was going to happen. So when tour guides, which of course I see all the time, you know, right near the World Trade Center, and of course as a resident and going through the whole experience, it's very hard for me to stop and listen and hear what the guides are sharing. But the trauma for anyone who lived here is still there. So you can go on to the next one. And because this is just a general conversation about my work, I will say that one of the most important and fascinating experiences of my creative life was discovering the incredible stories behind the creators who built the Brooklyn Bridge. And because I live next to the bridge, it became a part of my soul. So in 2016, I embarked on my own personal journey to understand how, why, and what were the circumstances to get this bridge built. So it took me years to put this book together. So this is an early photograph I took because this, again, the waterfront has been no man's land for as long as we can remember. And we had a large homeless population that was living under the bridge at the time. You can continue on. And this photograph that I took, which became a book cover for many novels and plays, including Arthur Miller's A View from the Bridge. I think the reason people liked it so much is because we didn't have all the new skyline in Brooklyn. And again, I didn't photograph this 100 years ago. You know, this is 1998, you know, or 99. So, and also, it evokes something because this one tower in the middle, and since I come out of a painting and drawing background, everything for me is about how do we tell a story visually where, you know, the elements of what you're trying to say have to be right in the picture. So the bridge in this photograph, I believe, is very beautiful and contemplative, but that's up to the viewer. So we can continue. So in this slide, because early on in my experience, I was in Mulhausen, Germany, because I had to retrace the steps of John Roeblen, who was the bridge's designer and who had immigrated to America in search of a place where he could finally express his own creativity. And of course, it's a story of struggle and sadness and tragedy. But back in Mulhausen, you can see John Roeblen's life was totally influenced by his environment, just like most people who live in these locations in New York are impacted by their surroundings. So everything in Mulhausen is about the Gothic image, the Gothic structure, whether it's the priest store or the guy who has a house down the block. When you're a young person and you're surrounded by this predominant architecture, it starts to sink in. But here you have the Geary building with one of Roeblen's majestic towers that he designed. We can go on to the next. And this I hope will be of interest to the tour guides because in 1999, I battled the city to get inside the Brooklyn Bridge. It's not something that they're really thrilled to have photographers taking pictures of the decadence inside our greatest landmark. But it's really because of being inside the bridge that it spurred my curiosity about how the bridge was built. And again, this is not a talk about the Brooklyn Bridge, but what I will say, and I'm saying this, and it's a cautionary tale, okay? That because I spent years working on this book, I have been over that bridge, I have listened to virtually every podcast, a lot of the tour guides, and they just don't get their facts straight at all. And there is nothing more frustrating to me than having people out there sharing information that's just not correct. And it impacts the people that you're sharing it with. So since this topic is so dear to my heart, I felt I needed to mention that if you are up on the bridge, you can always, there's always great supporting material to read so that, you can get the interesting aspects of the story out, including my book. But David McCullough's book, of course, is the quintessential novel about the Brooklyn Bridge called The Great Bridge. Okay, we can continue. And just so you know how important John Roebling's designs were, and that of his son, who actually built the bridge, and his wife, who actually put up with him and his misery for 20 years until the bridge got built, 14 years. The other bridges that adjoin the Brooklyn Bridge are all made with Roebling wire steel. So once America discovered the wire cable rope, it became intrinsic to American technology. And it all started in a little backyard in Saxonburg, Pennsylvania, when Mr. Roebling started experimenting around with twisting the iron wire instead of using hemp rope. So for me, that's a pretty interesting fact. And of course, the waterfront would not be the waterfront without the random stuff that you find, from traveling back and forth every day, so from the river. So this photograph, there was such a mystery around how this beautiful piano showed up, and it was all over the news. Whose piano was this, and who did this, and it turned out it was a performance artist went down there with the piano to shoot a video, and they just couldn't get the piano off the beach. So they just left it there. I mean, I was dumbfounded. But again, all of these little vignettes from this book are just vignettes, because the story in the end is really about capturing the character and the soul of neighborhoods. And if they change, the question is why? What were the forces? And who? And why is it even important? So instead of me just showing you pictures, oh, well, this is what it looked like back then, and this is what it looked like now, to me, that's like a quarter of the story. The real thinking is why, how, and thinking about people. Why do they save things? Why do they collect things? Why is there artifacts? Or why did, everything should be about the whys. So for me, in putting this project together, it was trying to answer some of those questions about why do cities change? How do they change? Who are the people? Who are the movers and the shakers? Who are the ones that got left behind? So we can go to the next. And since I was around for a lot of the destruction of Tribeca, of the Bowery, of this area, I, very similar to Eugene Auger, which was the most seminal European photographer photographing the destruction of Paris, and by Huysman, and they all know his name, and all the Parisians know that guy's name. He's sort of like the Robert Moses of Paris. So this is a photograph. I still don't know who that is or who the dog is, but again, we've had a lot of mysterious fires downtown. So this is a photograph I shot after another fire, which destroyed a few of the historical buildings in Peck Slip. So this is more evidence that there was serious forces at work downtown to really, and a lot of these fires, I call them mysterious because we will never really know who exactly were the culprits. So we can get on to the next whenever you have. And I photographed this. This is actually with my iPhone. And one of the things that you learn as a visual artist is about angles and how an angle can create an emotion. So I tilted my camera. So when the new market was finally earmarked for the wrecking ball, this was my sad and sympathetic note to that facade, which of course, if you see it, this was built during the Art Deco period in New York in the 30s, and it was its own, it had its own intrinsic beauty, you know? So we can continue. And these are some of my photographs showing, again, in this area by the bridge, the bringing in of the giant rigs. And for me, they always look like sculptures. You know, there's always a way to tell that story without you actually knocking down the building. It's implied in the composition. And then you see the little worker down here, you know, so there's a layering of information. So again, what this book, this project, this story of mine is about is visually is telling you, sharing with you the experiences of watching these things over time fall away, fall off. The next chapter is, what do we replace it with? That's the biggest question. So we can go on. Okay, so again, I am a local yokel and I live a few blocks from the World Trade Center. So this is a photograph, and I think if there's anyone here from the museum, isn't that the Pioneer?
Yes.
That is, oh, yes,
It
that
looks
is the
like it,
Pioneer.
I said, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is, because I was on a tugboat. I had a boyfriend then with a tugboat. I don't remember. But the point is that it was such a beautiful photograph that I decided to include that in this collection so you can advance the picture. So the next one, of course, is I never published any of my pictures on 9/11, but the reason that there's a reason why it's in the book, because it's part of the story that we all have to tell about New York. First of all, it looks like the plane actually was in the building because I wasn't using an iPhone, it was my real camera, because I made a series of pictures. So this one was extremely stark and compelling, and I shot it from my roof. But there's a reason that I included 9/11, not only because it's part of the tragedies, but it's also part of our story of rebuilding and renewal. So you can, and so again, I would go around the neighborhood photographing all the buildings that were considered obsolete, warehouses, factories. This is on Canal Street, and you can see that I have a sense, again, it's unconscious. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about creativity. There's so much that's, you know, it's unconscious. You just do it because it comes from a place deep inside of you. So this was, they cleared some of the old tenements to put up a hotel near Canal Street. And these are some of the photographs from my early work that I did for the Howard Hughes Corporation. It was a real push and pull with me in so many ways, but I thought it was better to share the work than not share the work. So sometimes people actually stop and look at it when they're not staring at their iPhones. And some people say that's the most interesting part of the Tyndall link. So I don't know, but the food's pretty good, but it's very expensive. So anyway, okay. And the language wall, again, goes back to my love of trying to understand the people who lived there or who worked in certain neighborhoods. So I did these language walls, and you know, these were quotes from my oral histories, and you know, for people to remember and to understand the commitment they had to their own jobs. So, and as I conclude this talk, so we are now in the new Lower Manhattan, and this is a view actually from the offices of Howard Hughes, looking at the new World Trade Center, and you can see the canyons, and you know, there's very few, you know, there's a few of the seminal buildings still there, but everything is in the process of transformation. And okay, you can go. And again, this was at the opening of the South Street Seaport in 1985. I love this picture, but that's your what's the word? Demographics. These are the people that are going to look to you for all this vital information. So in my view, it's a serious thing. And I put in this picture, it's for my overall portfolio of New York, which at some point I'll make into a book, but I'm not ready yet. But you can see here the changing of the neighborhoods and the ethnic demographics are in constant movement. So you have the old Jewish matzah bakery in Williamsburg with the new rappers walking down the street. So it's a story, the story of New York and the story of Lower Manhattan. And one thing I didn't really highlight, which I should have with Nunzio's talk, is that it's based on immigrant blood, immigrant work, immigrant ideals, immigrant codes of behavior. And that is really the story of Lower Manhattan, you know, given the fact that the Lenapes got paid off and left. Everything else after that became a giant tug of war between the work, the visions, the idealism, and the greed. So anyway, I'm kind of done. So if you have any questions or anything, I'd be happy to answer them. And I also have, you know, I don't like to talk myself, but I brought a few books here. So if anyone, and I recommend my book and also my writing mentor, Philip Lopez's book, the waterfront by Crown, because he walked this whole place and just touched on such great highlights. So I just thought I would mention that. So if anyone has any questions, you can ask me or
Zach, can we
comment.
put the lights back on?
Thank you very much, Barbara.
Sarah's got the lights.
As tour guides, as we know, we, depending on our tour, we're dealing with both the current, what was present, as well as the past, and sometimes it's a challenge when a building's no longer there. We have to figure out how to tell the story or, get the old pictures. And so Barbara and I, when she was prepping this, a little bit more geared for tour guides, did talk about the similarities with grappling with the old and the new and what's gone. And also, as an author and in some ways also a photographer, we talked about the importance of accurate information and doing research. So I commend you for doing research as well. And I know we've all overheard inaccurate information being passed along, but Barbara, I just want to, GANYC, one of our, I think goals or part of our mission is to, we're all already licensed tour guides, so we passed the test, but is to keep educating ourselves and set high standards for quality information as well as accurate information. So thank you for reiterating that. I think we have a little time for
Any more questions?
questions.
If you have a question, you can stand up and say your name, please. Any questions for Barbara?
You gotta have a question, come on.
John Hanke, you mentioned sadism and racism. You mentioned sadism and racism.
Yeah.
Could you kind of add a little bit to that?
Yeah, okay, well, when I was down on the waterfront, you have to remember, and this is something I... Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Okay, well, you have to remember, I was down there in the, I live here, so I've been around a while. And one of the most interesting and fascinating parts of the story of this side of the waterfront is the fact that the fish market was run predominantly by immigrants coming from southern Italy. It's called the Mezzogiorno because in the middle of the day it was too hot, so you had to go inside and take a long lunch. But it was basically something that was so fascinating to me, not only because I come a third generation immigrant, but because the South Street and the waterfront was unregulated for decades. And because of that unregulation, there was no police. And of course, I'm gonna kick myself for saying this, but obviously, Mario Puzo was a great writer and understood Italianism. There's also great books that I had to read about Italianism. There's also the whole idea of going back into European history and understanding the medieval mind in places like Sicily and far south of Rome, where people were always mistrustful of the government because it's not government as we know it today. And don't let me start talking about, I did not put in this talk what I have in my book. I spoke to a woman who was madly in love with one of the godfathers and talked all about accountability and criminality and all of that. But in Italy, because there was such a fear of outsiders and fear of government taking all their money and bringing all the farmers' agricultural goods, out of their realm and giving them nothing to survive on, the mistrust of that situation and the violence and the internal wars made it so that they carried those ideas to America, that was intrinsic in their thinking. So as a result, the market was a very closed environment. And if you started showing up a lot, and I know that Joseph Mitchell became a real fixture there, but believe me, he didn't just waltz in. It took months and years of constant curiosity and trying to bridge these forces that, were difficult to bridge, like ethnic differences, psychological differences. So getting back to answering your question, because of the predominant Southern Italian mentality, there was a lot of racism. There were hardly any African Americans working there, hardly any, number one. Number two, if there were Koreans or people like that who had inway into the market, they too took on, it's almost like you take on it's like, even if you're lower on the ladder, you take on the characteristics of your punisher, your torturer. So everyone had something to prove down there, and the only way you did that was by proving you're tough, and lots of times that toughness was mirrored in violent behavior, sometimes toward the black people that worked there who would have regular beatings, sometimes towards people who had alcohol problems, which was not allowed in such a tremendously stressful job. In other words, there was a lot of racism and beatings and murders. So, any other questions?
We're running a little bit behind tonight, so if anybody wants to buy Barbara's book, do you have a number
Yes.
with you? She
Yeah.
can
And we
sign
could
them,
be in
and
the
she
back,
can be in
maybe
the
in
back.
the back, we'll be in the
We
back.
do have to leave the boat by 8 o'clock, so our committee reports are gonna have to be very brief. And then you are, Barbara.
Yes.
Beautiful photographs, by the way.
Thank you.
Absolutely stunning.
Thank you.
Thank you.